The inspiration is not a luxury. What do I mean? Well, I mean, the pragmatic requires imagination, like plants require water, like lungs require oxygen. They need one another. It means if you save or put off or suspend the things that make you feel alive, you'll have an empty cup, unable to pour yourself into the world. There's certainly a theme in this chapter of my life, right? I'm noticing the internal struggle that exists between slowing down and speeding up, right? And enjoying life while simultaneously building one. So how do we make these two seemingly contradictory things exist together? Well, maybe they're not so contradictory at all. Maybe the work is just a manifestation of the inspiration. The building is a direct consequence of the doing. What one puts out into the world is a direct consequence of what one takes in from the world. And so recently I went to Sedona, and this is going to be an incredibly anticlimactic chain of events, except for the fact that I had very little reason to go. It cost me time, it cost me money, pulled me away from my studio. But I felt called to head that way. I needed a change of scenery, I needed something breathtaking, something bigger than my notebook and my patio, as beautiful as they are and as grateful as I am to have them. Perhaps you've been there too, right? That sudden call for new stimuli, to wake up the sleeping giant that is the imagination. And so I went. 2 hours to a landscape so stunning, it's hard to even comprehend, right? Paths through winding pine trees, flowing creeks, singing birds, sunrises illuminating a new world, and sunsets pulling back the curtain on an endless sea of stars. It was quick. Less than 48 hours. But what does that experience become? Well, it becomes, upon my return home, a spotlight on my reason why. It was what I needed at that point in time. Sometimes we do and do and do and forget why we're doing. It was a reminder that life is not a cyclical routine, not a process, but an experience, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I'll never forget, Wayne Dyer talking about an orange and how, it doesn't matter how many times you squeeze an orange, grapefruit juice is never going to come out, right? It can only give what lives inside it. You'll only ever get orange juice from an orange. And so, upon recalibrating how I look at and feel about the world, even momentarily, I have more beauty to give. More strength, more inspiration, more power inside to share with the world, more light to pass on. Why? Because of what a seemingly trivial 48-hour experience reminded me. And by the way, this is not a me story, right? This is an everyone story. It doesn't have to be Sedona. It doesn't have to be anywhere, right? Those things that light you up, they matter, and that is the point. The instances of inspiration are just as important, if not more important, than everything else you're doing. Because it's through the inspiration that we come to embrace the best version of ourselves. It's through inspiration that you're able to pour beauty back into your own life, the lives of those around you, and into the world in totality. The inspiration around you is the oxygen necessary to fuel any flame worth burning. And so, yes, it matters. Try it, do it, see it, chase your curiosity, say yes to the spontaneous impulses to dive deeper into life. The inspiration is not a luxury. It's what keeps our hearts beating and our eyes truly open. The inspiration is why we're here. Everything happens for a reason. That's what they say. But what's not often said is that you get to decide what that reason is. Every occurrence is a tool, only as valuable as its utilization. Right? In other words, as the famous saying goes, it's not what happens, it's what you choose to do about what happens. A great painter wouldn't let a dollar store paintbrush and cheap paint get in the way of excellence. No, they'd find a way to transfer their genius to the world. I remember, growing up a Red Sox fan. And Boston's one of the toughest environments for athletes to play in, just because of, the pressure of the city, the media, the fans, every pitch is scrutinized. There's the expectations are high there. Sometimes even unrealistic, and that was the situation. That was the reality. And I remember seeing players join the team, and some of them would just light up. They would thrive in that environment where every pitch is watched, every game is talked about. They'd show up and they'd feed off the energy. And then there'd be some players that would fold like a lawn chair. The pressure was too much. Players that, by the way, were stars in other cities. Another way of saying, same situation, same resources, different outcomes. Right? Different players built different realities with what was at hand. And that's one example of many I could give, right? But the idea here, if you think big picture, is that life is an infinite assortment of tools. It's not provided to you pre-assembled. It's there for you to build, right? Reality is your responsibility. You've just been handed supplies. End of a relationship. You're sad. I've been there. We've all been there, right? So what are you going to do about it? What are you going to make with it? And that might seem insensitive, disheartening, even impossible while you're going through it. But if you want to build something precious from the pieces that remain, you can. As crazy as that might seem amidst the storm, you can. You can take what you've learned, you can pick your chin up, you can find out in the world what you thought you already had. Or let's say you had an opportunity of some sort fall through the cracks and you wanted this opportunity. You wanted it bad. You thought the deal was sealed, but reality's different. It's gone. Missed it. Swing and a miss. So what now? Again, same question. What will you build? A statue to remind yourself that you're not good enough? Or a bridge to the next thing? Will you allow that disappointment to become armor that you wear? And that's exactly what it is, right? It's like you lost, you scuffed your knees, maybe your ego's hurt, your pride's hurt. You told people great things were gonna happen and they didn't. Well, you look to your left, look to your right, maybe you realize, hey, I'm still here. Life is still going on. Maybe worst case is not that bad, and maybe I can take that knowledge and that confidence onto the next thing. Maybe I can be a little bolder, live with a greater sense of curiosity, be more determined in my exploration. Everything happens for a reason, so why not manufacture the best reasons? Everything happens for a reason, so why not reason your way into that ending that's meaningful? I point to 26 as the age I learned that, I can choose my own outcomes, create my own reasons. Because prior to that, it was, this is the hand I'm dealt, so this is what I'm supposed to do. This is how life is supposed to happen. But there are no supposed tos, none, zero. There's what you choose to build with what you have. And by the way, indecision is also a decision. Not doing anything at all is often the same thing as building a cage around yourself. Let that news hit you like the miracle that it is. Sure, it's tough, it's humbling, but the truth is everything around you, what you call reality, you've chosen. You've allowed to exist the way it is, and you're capable of changing that at any moment. Redefining the quote-unquote reason. So perhaps it's not as much that everything happens for a reason, as much as it is that everything happens. The reason is entirely up to you. Just imagine if we implemented into our lives all those things we already knew would make us better. Imagine if we became masters, not just of knowing, but of transforming knowledge into motion. A friend of mine, Tyler, will reach out every once in a while after listening to one of the episodes, and we'll just kind of riff back and forth on the content, chat about the overlaps, the differences, most importantly, how we can each in our own worlds be a little better, happier, and healthier. Tyler recently built and sold a tech company and is now transitioning into a new chapter of his life. And in essence, starting over, which is something I can in many ways relate to. And this morning I got a voice note and said, man, imagine if we implemented wholeheartedly the things we knew to be true. Imagine if we could execute for ourselves with the same advice that's so obvious when looking out at the world, at others. And I thought, oh man, right? As someone who's spent a decade thinking and philosophizing about this stuff, this is a very real and valuable question. Not only that, it sort of comes at a perfect time. And here's why. Right, those of you who have been listening to the channel or podcast for a long time, you know this, for me, has been one great adventure, documentation of a journey. Starting with the first video I ever released, Ode to Excellence, which was essentially me promising myself just to give this creator thing a try and not go back to what I knew to be safe, to videos like Running in the Rain, where I discuss my coming to understand the value of identifying as a person who does the hard thing, to speeches like Make You Proud, where all I'm really doing is, during hard times, assuring myself that things will be fine. To more recently, where sure, I'm finally seeing some of that growth and 10 years of effort compounding, but now grappling with brand new challenges. Right, since day one, I've been coaching myself through the ups and the downs, but what are these stories? What do they provide for me, or for those who listen to them? Well, in a sense, they're the lessons learned. They paint a portrait of the ideal. They're merely information. Yes, life gives you more when you ask more of life. And yes, discomfort is often the cost of admission. Yes, you can get through life's greatest storms if you take it one step at a time. And yes, the challenges we face evolve and the context changes, but we are equipped to confront and handle them. Guess what, though? None of that information matters if we don't act on it. If we're not using the past to recreate the present. Those stories are my map. But even the best map in the world is meaningless unless it's being utilized. And Tyler's very simple and direct question was valuable to me in that it did two things. First, it made me think, Eddie, look back at your journey. Look what you've overcome, right? In a number of ways, you've learned. You know what needs to now be done. And simultaneously prompted me to ask, and so now, this very moment, what are you doing about it? I love the lesson. I think there's art in our struggle and beauty in the overcoming of our suffering. But if all those lessons, if the ideal remains stagnant like a caged bird, what's the point? That wisdom must be set free, and that only happens with a targeted, deliberate effort. I felt this sense of excitement, invigoration in asking myself, how can I highlight the doing? Where can those wheels hit the road faster? How can I delve further into those very epiphanies I love to explore? Something that I'm encountering now that's both fun and challenging is the transformation from, really being a solo creator, speaking, writing, producing in his studio, to seeing the process as a business owner, to building a support structure and systematizing workflows, right? As a friend has said to me before, a little less Mickey Mouse in order to be a little more Walt Disney. And it's happening, but the truth is, right? You don't get where you're going the same way you arrived where you are. So how can the old lessons be turned into action now? Knowing my world changes the second I decide to act is like having an unused arsenal at my disposal. Knowing my foot is barely touching the pedal is power. And we can all focus on that actualization of our knowledge. We can all ask, what's one thing I can do today that I know that I need to, that perhaps I wouldn't have, but didn't give myself a little push. I love the idea of that simple diagram where you draw a line straight down a page, and on the left side, you're listing your current obstacles, the things that are really bothering you, or the reasons you're stuck. And then on the right, one single thing you're going to do about it. All it does is reinforce action. And action is everything. Because to Tyler's point, I really know what needs to be done. We all really know what needs to be done. Not how things will end, or maybe what the finish line looks like, but we know now. We have a gut sense of what we need to do and where the opportunity lies. We're aware. We understand. So a world where we become masters of doing is a world where we transform beyond our wildest imagination. And the things I talk about, they can ultimately in my life become everything, or wither away into nothing. They can sit there as a supposed to, an ideal, and ultimately I wish I did. All that depends on what I do with it and how I choose to act when I'm uncomfortable, moving into a new space. The same can be said for anyone listening to this. You're equipped with at least a starting point. You probably know what you don't like. You're probably aware of some things that must be eliminated or left behind. But knowing that is only as good as your first step. So are you willing to partake in the doing? In taking the little pieces of wisdom and breathing life into them by walking out your front door? By looking in the mirror and trusting in your ability to adapt, to change, to grow. In a world of complexity, let's simplify. We know what must be done, so let's focus on the doing. And on the journey, if we misstep or miss the mark, adjust and move again. Because we know there's nothing more tragic than doing nothing at all, right? Do something today that takes an axe to the tree of stagnation. Not everything, but one thing. When you are in motion, that world seems to conform, to rearrange around you. So here's to giving life the opportunity to make that happen, to giving yourself the opportunity to experience it. As Tyler stated, just imagine if we implemented wholeheartedly the things we knew to be true. Not kind of, or sort of, but with the same or greater intensity, and in many cases intentionality, it took to acquire the knowledge. What would that look like? Let's move now. Let's swing away. Let's uncover that world where your lessons translate to feet on the pavement and reality in the palm of your hand. I recently heard someone say, it's not about doing your best. It's about doing what's required. Are they different? Very. Here's my take. Doing your best has an emotional component attached to it. It's subjective. What exactly is your best? Well, it's a story that you tell yourself. A narrative opening the door to limitation. I've always found that when we put our backs against the wall and venture into scenarios where it's essential that we get something done, we somehow always find a way. When we leave no plan B for ourselves, we are required to make plan A work. And so we do. It's a testament to both the resilience and power contained in the human spirit, as well as the reality that we can astound ourselves when we're unwilling to take no for an answer. That it's not the resources that are the problem. It's usually our unwillingness to move forward into the dark, our hesitance to try, explore, test, build, and rebuild. Actions that are surprisingly unrelated to one's best and have everything to do with accepting nothing less than an identified outcome. One of the reasons I fell in love with the sport of running is because it reinforced this notion in my life. It became the template with which I could repeatedly amaze myself. I talk a lot about earning confidence. And oh, how I earned it. Step by step, mile by mile, day by day, in the sun, in the rain, in the desert, in the woods, through city streets, all over the country and the world, I came to understand the relationship between the turbulence of now and the satisfaction of later. It was on those days I'd push beyond my usual level of comfort, when that cloud of pain and agony would hover over me. I couldn't even really point to where my body hurt. It just all seemed to come together into this one giant hell, and to learn that I could not only endure that, but grow in those moments. To see myself rise above any preconceived notion or understanding of best in order to defeat my demons, conquer the day's objective, it changes the way you see yourself in the world. Now, could onlookers be tempted to call these self-created goals arbitrary, even unnecessary? Sure, and I get why they would, but I'd also completely disagree. Those days were a masterclass in doing what is necessary. Realizing that when you shut your rational brain off and don't give your mind a chance to talk your body out of it, you can see just how powerful you are. You realize that story of your best is nothing more than a house built on sand. Life is not about that story you've told yourself. It's not about your personal records and peak performances, what you think you can do or how far you think you might be able to go. It's about not stopping in the moments when it hurts. Doing what is required, a decision that compounds over time to create what was once impossible. One of my favorite quotes is by Admiral William McRaven, an absolute hero of mine. And funny enough, he says, if you want to change the world, you must be your very best in your darkest moments. And what a beautiful idea, to rise when life presents its periods of turbulence. And sure, it may be a matter of semantics, but in those moments of darkness, I think of your best, not in the traditional sense, not as a personal metric, but as a willingness to do what must be done, a removal of the spotlight from you altogether and instead pointed directly at the road ahead, at the task at hand. When you choose to make the journey not about what you can and cannot do, but instead make it about what must be done, the universe, as Paulo Coelho has so elegantly stated, conspires to make it happen. I think back to my journey, and at so many periods my best wasn't good enough. I was so lost and so overwhelmed that the only thing I could do was not stop moving. That was my superpower, simply trudge through the fear of things falling apart, the nagging pride and hurting ego. And what I learned was that life is no different than all those miles I'd put in running. How I felt, or what my previous capabilities were, what I deemed my best to be, it was all noise, it was all irrelevant. What was required was that I move forward through the chaos and to something better, and so I did. And in your world, so can you. The stories we tell ourselves are so powerful and in many ways valuable in our journey through life. But there's one narrative that eliminates the necessity of so many others. You can get to the top of whatever mountain you are seeking to climb so long as you do not stop. So long as you let go of the limitations tied to your quote-unquote best and instead do what is required to get there. You'll see how adaptable and transformative that best really is, how it's a lagging indicator. It will take time, but you're capable of being patient. And it will have its moments of chaos, but you are capable of weathering those storms. It will present obstacles that leave you unclear, uncertain, sometimes unprepared, but you're capable of picking your head up and moving through that haze. What you know of yourself now is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what you're capable of doing. And how far that goes will be determined not by putting a stake in the ground and calling it your personal best, but as Emerson has said, by hitching your wagon to a star and pulling yourself towards its light, a little bit at a time. The other day, I heard someone say that they've found some of the most important things in their life in places where they weren't supposed to find them. Which is interesting to me. One, because that seems to happen a lot. And two, because it's like, who creates the parameters around what we're supposed to do? Who sets the rules to begin with? I'm continuously blown away by our tendency to create imaginary walls and then live within them. To build steel bars around ourselves that separate the now from future opportunity. In one of the first videos I ever made, I talked about this nagging feeling of discomfort that occurred right after I left the corporate world and started my own business. And at that point, to call it a business was giving myself a lot of credit. I was basically just starting to make videos and put them out on social media. But I would run in the middle of the day, right? That was my thing, right through Boston, along the Charles River. I loved running. But I couldn't help feeling this guilt, like I wasn't supposed to. Like I was doing the wrong thing, doing what I was taught not to do. My whole life, I learned that you go to school or work during the day. That's the right thing. And a decade removed, I've grown and I've learned. I know how crazy it sounds now. But it took me a long time to even enjoy it and not feel like some deviant who was leaving everything he'd worked for up to that point to go and fail spectacularly. Right? The supposed to followed me around like a shadow, constantly trying to pull me back in. Freedom to me is separating oneself from this exact sentiment. It's doing what's best for you, exploring your own worldview, blazing, as the saying goes, your own trail. Because you'll find very few supposed tos there. I think this is a microcosm of a greater truth. The most important things we do in life, our pivotal moments, our epiphanies, are found where we weren't supposed to find them. Because what we're supposed to do is very rarely methodically thought out. It's simply the norm. It's marching orders. It's what the crowd is doing. It's what will help us blend in. And it's interesting, as I've pushed further and further into life, I've come to believe that rarely is what's best all one thing or all another. It's working to find a balance that supports your ideal life trajectory, right? That balance will lean substantially more one way or another depending on who you are and what's important to you. And so, I'm not suggesting one always needs to be different, or if something is common, it's wrong. No, thousands of years of evolution and societal stressors have in many ways narrowed down for us what's effective and efficient. It's helped us survive. And to dismiss this outright is obviously counterproductive, but it does explain why any break from these norms physically hurts. We associate them with survival. And here lies the divide between surviving, which we are supposed to do, and excelling, which is to embark upon a different game altogether. Survival is mitigating risk. Excelling is hunting down the opportunity. Survival is blending in. Excelling is asking, what about me is unique and how can I dive into that fully? Survival is not having to innovate on any large scale because the instructions are clear and laid out for you. Excelling is asking, now that I know the rules, how can I bend and maybe even break them so that I can improve my life and the lives of those around me? And I'll continue with the same example because I know a lot of folks find themselves in a similar situation now. I wasn't supposed to deviate from my previous life trajectory, my education, my career track, my 401k, but I did. And I found something I otherwise would never have, an ability to work on what I enjoy and share that with others. I wasn't supposed to leave home, the Northeast. The most important people in my life live up there. But I've found comfort, peace, and new beginnings down here that I never would have experienced. I wasn't supposed to do many of the things I'm doing today. It was a genuine curiosity and a willingness to chase down what's meaningful. And the beautiful thing is, anyone can do that. Every single one of us can detach and depart from the supposed tos in our lives. And hey, maybe some of them should be there. Maybe some are adding value and stability that you need and maybe even cherish. But I can promise some of them aren't. And it's worth a look. It's worth thinking about those things. Where can we be a little braver, a little more courageous? Where can we venture outside the scope of what we've subconsciously deemed everyday life? I love the notion that there's always more in you. You just need to give yourself permission to pursue it. Right? It only makes sense that no journey begins until we give it the green light. The world is yours once you give yourself permission to pursue it. So what are you conceding? What have you accepted as fact that upon further review you might find to be fiction? There's a world of infinite opportunity waiting for you, just past your acceptance of the way things are, just beyond all those supposed tos.